So when I was first presented with the opportunity to give this talk, I was honored and excited, replaced almost immediately with crippling anxiety. I knew what I wanted to share, but I struggled with feeling worthy of being the sharer. Who wants to listen to this fast-talking New Yorker with only a 2-year community college degree that took me 4 years to get? Like the majority of people socialized as women, I suffer from a pretty serious case of who do I think I am? Despite those insecurities, for the last 4.5 years, I have written, hosted, and produced a weekly Atlanta history podcast that's had 500,000 downloads, over 500,000 downloads. My 206 episodes have reached every continent, 130 countries, and all 50 states. Each episode covers a person, place, or event from Atlanta's past. Every once in a while, I get to interview a local author or researcher. Recently, I've been getting into oral history interviews with Atlantans who are in their 80s and 90s. And that's been wonderful, because as someone that researches the facts, it's been fun to talk to somebody who lived on a dairy farm in East Atlanta, or rode the streetcar to Girls High, or attended the first Black high school in the state of Georgia. If that wasn't enough, I have over 1,000 social media posts that highlight individual buildings and houses across the city with research and anecdotal information below each one. I've given countless of lectures, presentations, and panel discussions. I have developed tours for corporations, nonprofits, and colleges and universities. And my work is a true passion project, which means I don't make any money. And I do this because history is the common thread that connects us all. It helps us put our world into context. It makes us better humans. And history is how I understand people. And in a time when the world feels more polarized than ever, I think the first step is just understanding each other a little better. And so I've shared my long list of accomplishments, and yet I still struggle to call myself a historian or self-promote my work. I wasn't born here. I can't claim being a Grady baby. I didn't grow up here, so I can't claim a high school. And let me tell you, Atlantans are very serious about their high schools. I don't have a bachelor's degree, let alone a degree in history. So who am I to have a podcast, present myself as an expert, teach people about this topic? The society that I was raised in taught me to undermine my accomplishments, that celebrating myself is arrogant or narcissistic, and that my self-worth is a variable, dependent on other people's approval of what I do. And mine is not an isolated experience. In 2021, Harvard Business School had an experiment where they gave a cognitive ability test to men and women, and they had them guess their correct scores and overall performance. And equally performing women guessed their score to be more than half a point lower. In a same year study, also from Harvard Business School, they focused on the self-promotion gap, finding that women described their performance less favorably to equally performing men. And even when presented with their actual performance, that gap in their achievement actually persists. Even more depressing is they've replicated these results among 10,000 middle and high school age students. And that's really significant because it shows you how early the socialization begins. My favorite is an often cited Hewlett-Packard report that finds that men apply for promotions when they feel they meet 60% of the qualifications, and women will not apply unless they feel they meet 100% of the qualifications. And that last one really resonates with me because I don't want to do anything unless I do it perfectly. Perfection feels like a safeguard against criticism from myself and the world around me. If I just did it perfectly, then the imposter syndrome would go away, right? If I had a history degree, then I would never be mansplained, right? If I was from here, then nobody would ever call me a Yankee, right? But of course not. That's not how it works. As the famous quote goes, to avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, be nothing. But what does the world look like when women say nothing, do nothing, and be nothing? When they shrink themselves to avoid criticism, and out of a fear of not achieving perfection, they often don't even try. And so following my own advice, I looked back to Atlanta's history for some answers. And today I want to share with you 2 women from Atlanta's past, one white, one black, who I learned about not because of their many degrees or their published biographies or the buildings named after them, but because of a random mention in the newspaper and the other one, their headstone in a cemetery. Both of them were able to pursue their passions and make impacts in the city and in the world, both large and small. Laura Watson was born in 1886, and she was described as sickly from birth. She never married or had children, two things that were expected from women of her time. In 1940, her brother fell ill in New Orleans, and because she couldn't go visit him, she turned to sending him scrapbooks and cards for the holidays. Now, although he died just a couple months later, Laura turned her attention to sending cards to other people that were confined during the holidays. Now, it is the tail end of the Depression, and so greeting cards are really expensive. They're considered a luxury. But Laura was really skilled with scissors and glue. She would cut out old pictures, and she would cover up old signatures, and she'd put everything into a fresh, clean envelope. And she'd send those envelopes to the Milledgeville State Hospital, sending 2,500 of them in 1949 alone. In 1951, the Atlanta Constitution ran an article about her, and they asked Atlantans to send their old cards to her very small apartment on Ponce de Leon Avenue. And that year, she received 253,000 cards. She had to put them all in another room in her apartment. And with the help of her Sunday school class, she was able to send 25,000 cards to hospitals that treat those with mental illness, missionaries in Africa, children's hospitals, shut-ins across the Southeast, and rural ministers to distribute as they saw fit. And by 1968, there was a rumor circulating that Laura Watson, the Christmas card lady as she had come to be known, had died. And she sends this kind of angry letter to the paper. And she says, quote, "I'm not dead, I'm just really busy." She said, "I wish I had another life. I have so much left I want to do." Laura did retire from her duties in 1969. She died in 1978 at the age of 92. And I was so inspired by this story. Here's a woman who's in her 70s and 80s. She's too frail to leave her apartment, and yet she's able to impact the lives of people across the world with paper, scissors, and glue. Our next woman, her story starts in 1829 when she was born into a family that was enslaved. And after emancipation, she gets a job as a janitor in the train station in Macon. She later moves to Atlanta, where she spends 20 years working in the Union Depot. Now, Carrie was her name. She was astounded at the amount of orphaned Black children that she saw wandering the train station during her shift. And so she asked the railroad for permission to put them all into an unused boxcar. And then when she clocked out every night, she took them to her home on Auburn Avenue. And by 1889, Carrie is working on forming the first orphanage for Black children. In an era where 90% of Black women are laundresses or domestic workers, this woman is building an orphanage. Do you think she worried about her lack of qualifications or her lack of formal education? And while we'll never know what she was thinking, she was able to garner the support of every leading white man in Atlanta. And by 1890, the Carrie Steele Orphanage was open, and the city had donated land and a small cottage on today's Memorial Drive. And by 1892, there was actually a formal building dedicated and open to house 36 kids. And sadly, Carrie died in 1900 after suffering a stroke. And the epitaph on her gravestone reads, "The mother of orphans, she hath done what she could." But the Carrie Steele Pitts home is still in operations today. And since its inception, it has housed more than 20,000 orphan children. And so I shared my story and the stories of Laura and Carrie with the hopes of inspiring everyone in the audience to do the thing. Imagine a world where women like them didn't follow their passions, interests, or gifts. One of the thousands of people that received a card from Laura during a difficult and lonely time, or one of the 20,000 children that received care and a feeling of home because Carrie fought for them. Over the last 4.5 years, I've received hundreds of messages and emails, people telling me that I mentioned one of their long-lost relatives, or that they were moving to Atlanta and they were listening to learn more about it, or that they had moved away from Atlanta and they were listening to keep memories of home, or that I had helped them learn more about the city, its people, and themselves better. And if I let my socialization get the best of me, this podcast would still be sitting idle in the back corners of my brain. And each of you here has a gift, an interest, or a passion that the world needs you to share. What do you keep inside because of lack of qualifications or a formal degree or approval of others? It can be as small as a card, as regional as a city history podcast, or as national as an orphanage. I hope that today I've inspired you to put your gifts out into the world without fear. Thank you.